system. Can you tell everybody now that we're awake and conscious that I want to go back and I want to figure out how to heal? What role does the nervous system play in this, and what does a dysregulated nervous system mean?
Yeah. So just, going back to all of those different ways that we were just exploring and overviewing, we tend to our emotions as an indicator of dysregulation because our body's ability, emotions live in our body, their physiological shifts, changes in energy, changes in hormones, governed by our nervous system. So our ability to deal with, be with, like we were talking about earlier, and tend to and regulate our emotions is completely impacted by our nervous system. And so is everything else in terms of how we're going about the world. And I think this is, a little kind of the bigger picture of nervous system, that it extends beyond even how much stress or how much ability do I have to tolerate, to regulate, to stay responsive within stress or my upsetting emotional experiences. Our nervous system dictates how we're navigating the world around us, how connected we do feel. It begins with, and I was very intentional in separating the new workbook, How to Meet Yourself, into 3 different sections. And assuming that most people that will know my work or will be attracted to the workbook, the self that I'm referencing in the title is your authentic self, that deeper being that houses what makes you uniquely you, Mel, and me uniquely me. It houses our purpose, our passion, our interests, our curiosities, our ability to play, to be joyful, all of that stuff that many of us, I'm sure many of you listening, feel so disconnected from. So maybe I'm mean, but I did not start the book with how to meet your authentic self. It's broken up into 3 different sections. And the
Why?
first and the first section is how to meet your body, how to reconnect with your body. Because if you're in that survival mode, if your body is just trying to make it into the next moment, or so it thinks, oftentimes, again, based in past experiences, based in past perceptions, if you're not able to navigate these emotional moments and you're bringing up stories from your past and filtering your present moment through them in terms of your whole mental or emotional habit-based world, then you're not going to be able to have that safe space to reconnect, to ask those deeper questions. You're going to be locked in survival mode. So your whole way of being, in terms of how connected do you feel to the world you created around me, it's no surprise that as I entered my 30s, my answer was not at all. There was a time where I would read about people. I have a very vivid memory of reading, one of my few. I was reading a book by Dr. Wayne Dyer, and he was a psychologist, clinical trained psychologist like myself. And he was sharing more of a kind of his personal evolution from being a clinical psychologist and reconnecting with his passion and his purpose, and really changing kind of the way he worked, becoming an author, beginning to speak. And I read the book at the same time that my partner at the time, Lolly, read the book. And she was so, oh my God, so inspired, and would talk about her passion and things that interest her. She's such a curious individual, just in generally. And I read the book and I was like, that's a nice story. I think that maybe that purpose gene, that passion thing, it skipped me. Here's another right along lines with that neurological, memory issue. I was like, I don't feel passionate, even though, again, I was marching.
Right.
For as long as you would have heard me talking about what I want to be when I grow up, I was going to be a psychologist, though it didn't come from what I was hearing. Passion, purpose, right? Interest, curiosity felt like. And again, all of that is because if we don't feel safe in our body, if we can't witness our emotions, be with them, remain responsive, take the value in them, and allow ourselves to return back to safety, if we're, in other words, in survival mode, we're not going to have the ability to relax to explore things that we're interested in and curious about. We're not going to be able to identify or even connect with what our passion and our purpose might be, let alone make choices that are in alignment, live into that passion and that purpose. So our nervous system, going back kind of full circle, really governs all of that. We're not going to be able to feel authentically connected. What is one of the first things I say when we began this conversation? I was in relationships. I had a very active social life for as long as I can remember. I didn't feel connected, though, to the people around me. It was that kind of idea of being alone in a crowded room. I mean, if that didn't really describe my whole existence, because again, the reality of it was I wasn't authentically connected to myself. I wasn't authentically being me. I was always suppressing what my truth was and fear of upsetting someone else and hoping to people please or show up as they needed me. And I was operating in a version of survival mode. So the workbook, again, will take you through the journey of first reconnecting with that very unique individual body of yours that does share some universal components around our nervous system, beginning to explore and identify whether your nervous system is reacting to threats, whether or not they're present or not in your environment. Then we, can evolve, peel back the onion, if you will, and begin to explore, right? The ego, this story, all of these creations, narratives that we began to repeat from childhood that are continuing to often color these moments of reactivity. It's not necessarily what happens that upsets us. It's the sense that we're making of it. It's the meaning that we've assigned to the actions or the non-actions in our life that create those explosive moments, or those moments where you're like me, come close, but don't come too close because I'm going to dagger you, or whatever it is. And until, again, we learn how to create enough space to be responsive, to understand that our emotions are what make us alive, and to learn how to then regulate and navigate them, we're not going to have a chance at reconnecting with our authentic self and at discovering those deeper aspects of our being. So our nervous system really runs our whole ship.
It's everything.
From the moment we're born, from the moment, actually, if I want to go back further, the moment we begin our development. And for me, I believe that in a mother who was distracted, disconnected, who was dealing with very serious health-related issues, and my older sister at the time, who had her own health anxiety of her father dropping dead when she was in her early 20s of a heart attack, of seeing a very catastrophic car accident, coming home from honeymoon with my dad when they were driving home from Florida. My mom was so nervous that, actually, a story that was gifted to me at her funeral just a year and a half ago, my aunt was sharing, she got up to speak, and it was a very sweet story. And she was sharing the story of when my mom discovered she was pregnant with me. And how it began was my mom started to have symptoms, morning sickness symptoms. She was 42 years old at the time. And it was 15 years after she had her last kid. I was definitely not a planned product. They were done. So they thought of having children. So when my mom started to have stomach illness symptoms as consistently as, morning sickness would attribute to, she began to entertain the idea, secretively first, before she shared it with this aunt of mine, that she had stomach cancer, which is right in alignment, right? We have a health-based anxiety, a lot of health-based fear, because my sister, has her own health issues. My mom has chronic health issues. Of course, that's the meaning she made out of these symptoms. And she shared it with this particular aunt, who urged her to go to a doctor, to go see, if it is indeed stomach cancer, so she could begin treatment for that. And that's when she was gifted with the information that it wasn't stomach cancer at all. It was me developing inside of her. And the reason I'm sharing that is, and our first environment is that uterus, that, that body of the human who had us, who birthed us. So ultimately, for me, what I now know, and it's not surprising that a very commonly shared story in my family is when I was born. And I was born, healthy, and, thankfully everything was okay. I was actually born with a little sore on my thumb, and I sucked my thumb up until I was, much older. And the joke then is you were sucking your thumb in your mom's belly, you were sucking your thumb in utero. And I couldn't agree more. I probably was, because the amount of cortisol and stress that environment, was for me, with my mom unable. I mean, she thought she was possibly dying of stomach cancer. How fearful she must have been, of no fault of her own. In my opinion, my earliest environment felt unsafe. So I was soothing myself as a little developing fetus, trying to regulate what was for me this overwhelming, stressful environment. So in my opinion, the environments that we're talking about that can contribute to our nervous system dysregulation begin when we begin our development.
And that's where generational trauma comes in. Because, I relate to what you were just talking about, Dr. Nicole, because I can, when you look back with compassion and understanding, I go, my God, my mom was 18. Unexpected. Surprise. Here comes Mel. Drops out of college. Gets married, like all these things she didn't expect, far away from her family. I can only imagine how much cortisol and fear and anxiety and upset was coursing through her veins. I think about how alone she and dad were, not near family, and just how hard it must have been. And so, and I also see how that fashioned a hyper-vigilant, very anxious, overachieving, person in me. And I want to just to land this for anybody listening where this is brand new. You've never even considered these concepts. When Dr. Nicole talks about the nervous system, I want you, and then she talks about slowing down and, working through, for example, the first part of the book, which is going to force you to slow down. And it's going to force you to get out of the autopilot of your life and truly go inward and consider your lived experience in your body. The visual that I think about is your nervous system is sort of like the engine of a car. And it's like, for me, revving all the time. And so my lived experience for a long time, my version of autopilot, was feeling like I was a car that was that was just the engine was revved all the time, but I wasn't going anywhere. And that I had this sense of always like trying, but no relief of feeling like it was enough. And what happens and what Dr. Nicole is saying is available to you, that you are your best healer, that you can pull over. Like the view that you are driving past because you're on autopilot or you're checked out or you're flooring it and you're addicted to being busy and achieving and outrunning the sadness and whatever it is that you're trying to outrun, you are missing this extraordinary view because your nervous system is just revving. And healing is the process of slowing it down and pulling over and doing the inner work. And again, how to meet yourself, this latest incredible transformative work of yours, the whole first third of the book is dedicated to exercises to help you do that. And so that's the first thing that I wanted to say, that what we're talking about when we talk about nervous system regulation is imagine a life where when you go to the grocery store and somebody else walks in front of you and grabs the last can of tomato sauce that you had gone to the store to buy, you don't lose your shit. You literally are able to tolerate that and not lose your shit. Or you get an email from work and your boss is curt with you. And it doesn't trigger a spiral of thinking that has been around since childhood where that's it, I'm so unworthy, I'm so stupid, the beat down. And so when we talk about healing and we talk about regulating your nervous system, what she's actually saying is that you can liberate yourself from the experience of day-to-day life where you deliver the childhood beatdown you've been doing subconsciously forever, and the small, daily, irritating, disappointing crap that happens in life doesn't send you into an emotional tsunami or send you to bury yourself in alcohol. That is what's on the other side of this. Am I correct, Dr. Nicole?
100%. And it begins just using a personal my entire childhood lived experience up until my 30s. And I became aware. It begins with becoming aware, becoming conscious of yourself and your current experience, and in particular of your body. And what I wanted to share was I'm a self-proclaimed hippie at heart, I like to say, because all I've ever wanted is peace, rest, a moment to just be, and the freedom that I imagined that came with that. Yet what I was so largely unaware of until I began to turn that spotlight of attention down to my body is I never could rest. My family used to joke with me that I used to say, I'm bored, run a mile a minute. I was doing, always on the go, which very much mimicked always going to that next hurdle, checking that next box. To simplify it, I couldn't relax, no matter how much my mind wanted that moment of relaxation when I didn't have anything on my schedule, for instance, and I was just sitting there, right? Here was my day, my Sunday, it's time to relax. My body, because our body is talking to our brain in communication every moment of every day, my body was so tense. My nervous system was so dysregulated. This is where no amount of, in my opinion, positive thinking, me looking around saying, well, Nicole, nothing to worry about here. Just relax. You have nothing on your schedule. There's nothing to do. Why can't you just feel at peace? And the reason was because all of the signals that my body was sending my mind was that peace, relax. There is something unsafe. There's a threat. because there was tension in my muscles. My nerve, like you're saying, that buzz really resonated with me, Mel. Like my body was a buzz with how much I can't just sit in relaxation. And I just wanted to share this because there's so many of us, I've come to realize, who we can't relax because no matter how much we want that moment of peace and we're desperately seeking it, our body is sending our mind that that's the unsafest thing to do. We have to keep going. Our mind does then begin to race with the things to worry about, begins to scan our environment with the thing that is off, begins to agitate. If there was someone near me when my body was feeling agitated, and if it was a partner before long, I was probably nitpicking. I was probably creating and now an interpersonal conflict because my body was so agitated that it was only a matter of time before my mind was agitated and before my environment was agitated. So the conscious awareness, again, beginning in the body, beginning in these different states of nervous system dysregulation, often will give the answers to why many of you listening might not be able to feel peace, to feel restful. And again, back to the hope, I assure you, rest and peace is part of that too, is wired, as a possibility in our neurological human existence. Many of us just have to teach our body how to return to that space. And it's not until we are peacefully, safely connected, learn how to regulate our body if it is dysregulated, that we can then feel those moments of peace, that we can then, in the space of that peace, be who we are, safely share authentically who we are with someone else, and ultimately create those relationships that we all desperately want and need. As I looked around, I kept almost telling myself, well, what is wrong with you, Nicole? Why aren't you, feeling good about yourself? Why aren't you feeling fulfilled? Why aren't you feeling even connected to this life that you created?